I needed a hoagie roll that was cheap, took very little effort to make, and is high in protein. Why? I moved out of Chicago and my favorite bread bakery was based in Chicago. Over the last few weeks, I have made roll after roll after roll and refused to stop until it tasted like the famous Turano French rolls do when you make a visit to their bakery. During this recipe, I will also show you time-saving shortcuts and storage options so you can eat one a year from now and have it taste just as good as when you first made them. Let's get into it. You're going to start with a food processor on a scale. Directly into the food processor, add 240 grams bread flour and 60 grams vital wheat gluten. Vital wheat gluten has 24 grams of protein per serving while not changing the taste of an authentic hoagie roll because it is literally made from wheat flour. You can substitute it with another 60 grams of bread flour, but you will have to use less water since vital wheat gluten absorbs more liquid. Then add 8 grams dough conditioner, 6 grams diastatic malt powder, 2.5 grams instant yeast, and 5 grams salt. The dough conditioner and diastatic malt powder will help this recipe in a variety of ways, but if I had to choose only one to get, I would go with the dough conditioner. It is not only used in the real Turano rolls, but there is some malt powder in the dough conditioner already. Put the top on the food processor and blend on high for 60 seconds to get all of the ingredients mixed.
You know Daddy love you. Oh!
Get the food processor back on the scale and add 10 grams of Crisco. You may be wondering, why Crisco? Well, I knew to make this recipe I would have to deconstruct Turano's recipe from scratch, and I noticed their ingredient list includes palm oil. Palm oil just happens to be one of the main ingredients in Crisco and is readily available. From the first test batch, the Crisco instantly improved the softness and texture of the rolls and became a core ingredient. If you hate the almighty seed oil industry, feel free to use avocado oil or coconut oil for a slightly different final product. Begin mixing the food processor on high and let the Crisco mix into the dry ingredients for 10 seconds. Then slowly add 192 grams of warm water over a 20-second period and allow the dough to continue mixing for an additional 30 seconds. Plop that dough and any leftover remnants on your work surface, and knead it for 6 to 8 minutes. Kneading is super simple, especially for this lower hydration dough. All I do is grab, roll, and tear the dough with one hand, roll it back, then switch hands and grab, roll, and tear another part of the dough. You will know you are done when you can break a piece of the dough off and stretch it until it is super thin and almost see-through without it tearing, also known as the window pane test. Now what if you don't have a food processor or you don't want to knead it? I have a video where I show the full process of making baguettes without kneading that you can use for this recipe. I will link it in the corner if you want more details. Just keep in mind, loading the food processor and kneading the dough only takes about 12 minutes in total, while the stretch and fold or no knead method is about 1.5 to 2 hours in total with wait time. That is why for this recipe, I would rather just put my headphones in, get down to a few jams, and be ready to divide my dough right away. Whichever route you choose, it is now time to divide the dough. Using a bench scraper and a scale, separate the dough into 4 even pieces. This will be roughly 129 grams per hoagie. Push any smaller pieces of dough into the bigger piece of dough, flip it over, and shape into a ball, making sure to close the bottom. Place the dough onto a sheet pan lined with parchment paper or a baking mat. Repeat with the other pieces of dough, cover with another sheet pan or tea towel, and set a timer for an hour and a half. While you are waiting, you can check out this recipe as well as 120 others in my cookbook. Cookbook owners typically get new recipes at least a week before they get uploaded to YouTube and are already eating them before anyone else. Join the thousands of people who have lost weight using my recipes by clicking the link in the pinned comment and using code E4CM for 10% off. An hour and a half later, this is what our dough balls are looking like. They are smooth, gassed up, and ready for shaping. We are going to take all 4 doughs and flip them belly side up onto our work surface. Then put one of them front and center and using a rolling pin, lightly roll back and forth a few times. If the dough is too sticky, you can use a very, very light dusting of flour here, but you shouldn't need any if you start by rolling these out gently. At this point, the dough will be less sticky and easier to work with, so continue to roll them out while trying to make the shape of a rectangle. The goal here is to roll out all of the air bubbles and get it close to an even thickness. Pick up the dough and using the stickiness of the bottom side, make the dough into a makeshift square. The edges will be thicker than the rest of the square, so roll out the edges until you get a similar thickness. At this point, the rectangle should be about 6 inches wide and 6 to 7 inches long. How we shape the dough here is important and was difficult for me to figure out. I actually didn't get it right until the last test run. In a typical hoagie or baguette recipe, you would roll from the top to the bottom to shape the dough. However, a true Turano French roll has a more even thickness across, or what looks almost like a bow tie to me, which is just a touch wider at the ends. I couldn't find any video evidence of Turano shaping their smaller French rolls, so I tried smashing the hoagies down after shaping them and even tried pressing them down right before they went into the oven. No luck. Then it came to me. If I fold the dough instead of rolling it, I can make a dough that is wide edge to edge instead of one that is thick in the middle and narrow at the edges. So what we are going to do is fold the top part of the dough to the halfway point and seal the edges. Then we will fold from the bottom up, making sure to touch the bottom corners to the top corners while laying the rest of the dough along the top edge. It is important the bottom is folded tight so big air bubbles don't get trapped in the middle. We will finish by both sealing the edges and the length of the dough. What we are left with is a 6-inch piece of dough that looks eerily similar to a Turano roll before rising or baking. Sprinkle a baking mat or parchment paper with cornmeal and place the dough onto the cornmeal. Repeat the same process for the next 3 dough balls, making sure the shaped rolls are spread out enough to not run into each other as they are proofing. Cover with a sheet pan or a tea towel for 90 minutes. 90 minutes later, the rolls are doubled in size and ready to be baked. However, baking this recipe was difficult to figure out because I can't hearth bake like Turano does, which is just a fancy name for cooking the dough in a wood-fired oven. I tried baking at 6 different temperatures and baking times. I tried adding ice to a preheated cast iron pan. I tried spraying the oven after putting the hoagies in. I tried covering the hoagies with a piece of ice for different amounts of time. I tried baking on a sheet pan versus directly on the baking steel. The most realistic Turano results came when I baked the rolls directly on the steel with added steam. Speaking of which, about 15 minutes before the rolls are ready, get a metal brownie pan or something similar onto the bottom rack of your oven and start preheating the oven to 425 degrees. Since I will be baking these on my baking steel, I'm going to get a piece of parchment paper and put it on my pizza peel to easily slide the rolls on and off the peel. If you don't have a pizza peel, you can also use a cookie sheet as well. If you don't have a baking steel, you should definitely get one. They will last a lifetime. However, until it is delivered, you can use a sheet pan, but about 3 minutes before the rolls are done baking, you will have to flip them over to brown the bottom. Back to the recipe. We will grab each piece of dough from the bottom, lightly stretch it out from the middle for a couple of seconds, and place them on the pizza peel, making sure to evenly space them out. Our roll should be about 8 inches long at this point. If your launching device isn't at least 14 inches wide or you are newer to baking, you can bake these 2 at a time in separate batches to avoid any issues. Get 56 grams of water into a glass measuring cup and microwave for 30 to 40 seconds or until boiling. While the water is heating up, take a very sharp knife or bread lame and make a long cut down the middle of each roll. This is not only how Turano does it, but it will help the roll breathe while it is in the oven. Add them to the oven and using your oven mitts, pour the water into the brownie pan and quickly get the oven door shut. Watch them rise for 12 to 14 minutes depending on your oven, take those beautiful loaves out and get them on a wire rack to cool. Just look at how perfect these things look. Perfectly brown with a beautiful crumb and thick in all the right places. Very different from most hoagie rolls. If you are going to use these in the next 3 or 4 days, you can simply put them in a bread bag once completely cooled and they will have a perfect softness to them the next day. If you want that slightly crisp exterior when it is time to eat, throw a roll in a preheated 350-degree oven for 6 minutes and it will be as good as new. If you won't be using them right away, let them cool and throw them in the freezer for at least a couple hours. Then get them in an airtight bag and seal it up. When you are ready to eat one, throw it in a preheated 350-degree oven for 15 minutes and the hoagies are as good as new. Now, these hoagie rolls are going to be great for almost any sandwich, hot or cold. Sometimes though, you need a different shape of bread, and in this video here, I will show you how to make potato buns that are softer than store-bought and are also very easy to make. Until next time, deuces.